Hello, and welcome to Ultima Final Fantasy, the ultimate Final Fantasy podcast. I am your guest host, Greg.
And I'm your other guest host, Steve.
And today, we have taken over Ultima Final Fantasy and turned it into the Ultimate Saga podcast.
We used our Excalibur 15 to do it.
Yes, we used our Excalibur 15. We've got On the Loose playing in the background. Steve isn't hearing that now because we're talking with no noise, but I'm putting On the Loose by Saga in the background because we're reviewing another Saga game for Ultima Final Fantasy.
Excellent.
But it has Final Fantasy in the name, so we're still reviewing it for UFF.
So these completionist chumps should be doing it, but they won't.
Yeah, but you know what? We're doing it. We're making sure we review it before the weekly show ends so that you, faithful listeners of the show, who apparently a lot of people played this game, it's gotten a lot of positive feedback from people. We're talking about Final Fantasy Legend 2.
Wait, how far out are we from the end of Ultima Final Fantasy as a weekly series where they're going through the games?
They should have been done already, but of course they fell behind because they were hoping to be done by now. I'm expecting another 5 months.
Okay, so what you're saying is that as soon as we finish recording this episode, you're going to make me play Final Fantasy Saga 3?
So I've actually I'll probably be able to beat that in a week from now.
Okay, you haven't beaten it yet?
I haven't beaten it yet. I played a little bit of it. I'm going to try to avoid talking about it too much.
So tune in next week when we talk about Final Fantasy Saga 3, apparently.
Right. Well, Final Fantasy Legend 3, Saga, whatever. Let me pull up my notes here. So this game was originally called Saga 2, The Treasure Legend. But in the United States, they call it Final Fantasy Legend 2 because sales and making more money.
Why did you repronounce treasure? Was it so that you could add a quadruple ellipses in the middle?
I thought I mispronounced it. I thought I stumbled over my words, so that's why I did it.
Nope, you pronounced it fine. Then you just came back with the treasure legend.
No.
The treasure ...
I was just being self-conscious and thought I was failing as a human.
Well, I'm glad I called your attention to it so you could feel extra self-conscious on that.
Yeah, now I feel better and worse simultaneously. Probably.
You want to say some more completely coherent things than second guess yourself, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, probably feel worse now that I think about it because I thought that I said something incoherent when I actually said something completely coherent and legible. So that means that do I have that little self-esteem or respect for myself?
I think you should just keep thinking about it more and more until you just completely break down.
That sounds like a great idea.
Sounds like a good plan.
So yeah, Final Fantasy Legend 2 is a role-playing game developed by Square for the Game Boy, the second game in the Saga series, but to the US it's the second game in the Final Fantasy Legend series. It came out in December 1990 in Japan and November 1991 in the United States. I corrected my mistake from last time and made sure to look at the original release dates and not the report release dates.
Oh yeah, last time you said it came out, 2007 or something?
Something done. I think it was 98. Came out in 89 in Japan and then 98 in the States. This is a game that I missed out on when it first came out. Got a physical copy years later. It's a fun little game, but apparently this was, when I was younger, a big competitor for Pokemon. And that a lot of friends at school were like, man, Final Fantasy Legend 2 is so much better than Pokemon. And when talking with one of our guests on the Lipstick panel, not on Ultima Final Fantasy, but Michael Von Mueller from our Chrono Trigger episode was talking very favorably about this game and said kind of the same thing. Like, oh yeah, so you were one of those kids who thought this was better than Pokemon. Spoilers, it's not better than Pokemon. But it's a pretty fun game.
It certainly seems more difficult than Pokemon.
It is more difficult than Pokemon.
So, get good scrub, I guess, is the moral of the story for 11-month-old Greg.
Yeah, so it's another game where the lead designer was Akitoshi Kawazu. So that guy who was... It's sort of a weird thing that we ended up doing the Final Fantasy II spinoffs for our guest episodes, because we did Soul of Rebirth, and then I felt like doing the Legend series because Joe and Kaleb didn't want to do it. But ironically, that's like a spin-off from 2 and continuing the legacy of 2. So accidentally, there's a theme for all of our guest episodes.
Greg and Steve, here to finish out the parts of 2 that real hosts didn't want to do.
Right, so 2, one of the most hated games in the series, we did all the spin-offs and one's continuing that game's legacy.
The most hated game in the series that spawned all the sequels.
I mean, I feel like... it's tangents, but that's what Ultima Final Fantasy does. So really, we're keeping it authentic with going off the rails pretty shortly into the episode. I feel there's a large part of internet culture that assumes that if enough people on the internet say it, it's like accepted as truth. And I think I've gotten quite annoyed with it. We're just like, there are enough people in there who say Final Fantasy VI is by far the best Final Fantasy, and there's no room for debate. And I hear enough people say that, and I'm like, but there is room for debate. And I found a number of people who don't like that game.
So wait, are you trying to make the case that Saga 2 Electric Boogaloo is better than Final Fantasy VI?
I'm not.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, everyone acts like it is an automatic given that Final Fantasy II is a dumpster fire piece of trash. And I found a number of people who really liked that game. So, in the same way that there was a documentary about the Star Wars prequels and how the internet thinks the Star Wars prequels are trash, but they did a documentary about a bunch of people who's like, I didn't think they were trash when growing up, and how there was an entire generation who grew up with those movies, liked them, and didn't find them that much worse or better than the original trilogy. And just not accepting the narrative, from internet culture. So I don't know what point I was trying to get at with that.
That people tend to like to agree with each other, so as to maintain, basic tribal bonds. It's part of how we function as social creatures.
Right. But what I would say is, if these games were that hated, they wouldn't keep making them and keep making sequels. Like, they were making money. People were buying them. So if it was that hated, it'd be one and done. But you don't spin off an entire franchise if people really hated that.
I mean, they made a lot of Saw movies. It's really just about how much does it cost to make one of these things versus how much money does it bring back in.
Right, but I'm saying there's still... But then again, there's the Scary Movie franchise and a bunch of other things. But I'm saying there clearly is some kind of affection for the series for it to keep going. In the same way that there are a lot of people who criticize Kiss as a band that has no musical worth and are just a gimmick band. But you don't headline arenas 50 years later if you're just a gimmick band. Like, you have to have something more than just a gimmick. There's a reason why Guar isn't headlining arenas. You need a little bit more than just a gimmick. You do need good songs. So I'm saying that this series has to have some level of worth in that it, to have the number of sequels and sell as well as it did. Tangents.
By the same token, there are some people who say that the White Album is the greatest album of all time.
I don't say it's the greatest album of all time, but I'm saying it's really good.
I just, Yeah.
Have you even listened to that entire thing?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, so shut up.
Just harassing Greg and pooping on the Beatles. That's how I roll.
The White Album is a brilliant masterpiece, a successful genre-hopping album where it goes from reggae to heavy metal seamlessly. And I think it is the musical ambition of it is something unprecedented for its time, and is something that many bands aspire to. I would aspire to something like that, but not everyone can succeed, and the fact that they succeeded is part of what makes it brilliant. All right, so back to this old black and white Game Boy game from 1990.
Better than the White Album, because it has two colors.
Got me there, pal. So the game is set in a fantasy world where the player assumes the role of one of 8 different characters of varying race and gender who leave on a journey to find their lost father and discover the secret of Magi, a substance created by the gods that holds powerful magic. Quoted from Wikipedia, in case you're wondering what I am reading from. Second guessing myself, podcast listeners. Exploring their world, they learn that there exists other worlds connected in a celestial world by a winding, twisting tower called the Pillar of Sky, and using Magi, they can use it to reach each new world. They learn that new gods have risen to power in various places using the Magi, and not all are benevolent to their surroundings. Seeking to become more powerful, the gods are looking for the other fragments, but the heroes learn of the Guardians' worries, Guardians with a capital G, proper noun, worries that if all of the fragments of the Magi are brought together and the statue of Isis is reassembled, a terrible calamity will destroy all worlds. So,
Is this the same tower from the last one?
different tower.
Okay.
Unlike the previous Final Fantasy Legend game, where defeat in battle means game over, in this game the heroes are brought before the god Odin, which already, you can't see it, podcast listeners, but I've got my metal horns up for that.
He's really having trouble holding onto his phone right now. Just switch hands, Greg.
To read the notes. But, so when you lose in this game, you encounter Odin, and he's like, you are a powerful warrior. Do you wish to try that battle again? And it's, like one of the original retry functions. But like, you know how people complain about modern gaming being too easy and they just give you the retry after each failure? This game's like after every battle. Hey, you want to retry that? Like, not do a terrible job this time?
You want to try again, champ?
Yeah. But like, for a game this old, that's huge. And also the fact that it ties into the story, that's freaking Odin.
I mean, infinite retries isn't necessarily that uncommon. This is what, 90...
This is 1990.
1990.
And because remember, this is in the era of JRPGs being really brutal.
Yeah.
So like that is hugely different from everything else out there. Because it's usually like, the last save point was an hour ago. Sucks to be you. This is a long dungeon.
What year did Doom come out? Because that was sort of notable for Doom was sort of notable for having infinite retries. Although they, like, punished you for it and that they took away all your guns. Like, you want to do that level again? But we're taking away your rocket launcher.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Doom was obviously after this, I believe.
I think it might have been. Not much after it, though.
But, yeah, you're ready to get into some development history.
Okay.
Developed by Square in 1990, project headed by Akitoshi Kawazu and Hiromichi Tanaka, the guys who worked on the last game. So basically, same team, made another game. Like its predecessor, it was designed to be difficult and have advanced gameplay. So the goal for this series was to be harder than the Final Fantasy series. The music featured a couple pieces by Nobuo Uematsu, but most of the music was done by Kenji Ito.
My favorite part of the music was when it would like on loop forever.
Yeah, so not a ton of development history on this game.
Basically, the people who made the last one said, okay, let's take that engine and just add more story to it.
Yeah, speaking of story, that's the next section.
More story than we already covered?
Yeah, no, I'm basically my goal with the reviews that we're doing is allowing someone who might not have access to the game to experience the narrative and then see if it's really worth them seeking out.
So presumably you find your father eventually, and he's got the Magi of a pack of cigarettes he went out for.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the entire story. This is the longest note section that I have.
Okay.
Trust you to make the snarky jokes. I beat the entire game in traditional of our guest episode. Steve played like an hour of it. Played the first hour.
That's a generous thing to say.
Played an hour-ish and played the beginning of the game and fought the final boss and lost.
I didn't realize that he was going to have he was going to use his take away half your health twice in a row move.
But the main reason I play JRPGs is largely for the story aspect. And at this point with a lot of the Final Fantasy games, just a completionist aspect to say, all right, I've completed so many of these games, might as well just add more to the list.
Yeah.
When I do a review for UFF, I want to focus mostly on the story, and then we'll get into like gameplay mechanics, but I want to go through the story of the game and see if it is interesting to you at all.
I mean, it's possible. It's probably not going to be hard to sell the story as being better than it actually is. Just like the dialogue and presentation of the story, as far as I got, was pretty hackneyed.
So, ironically, I think the presentation is so much better than the last game in the series, where the last, we'll get into graphics and design later, but I think the script is actually way better, but I think the story is actually less interesting.
I don't remember pretty much any script from the previous one, so it's distinctly possible that it was better, but I don't know, this script was pretty rough from what I saw.
Yeah, I mean, this is very early in JRPG translations. I still want to describe the story for the people who care, because when Joe and Kaleb do the story, they tend to go just like plot point by plot point. So,
yep.
I want to be...
Plot point number 1, you are sleeping and are woken up.
A brief recap. So the story revolves around the Magi shards, of which there are 77 according to legend. So that is a nice collectathon, collecting 77 Magi throughout the course of this game.
The game said 66, so are there like 11 bonus ones then?
My notes say 77. There's a twist at the end. Spoilers. So the main character, which I named Goku, I kept the names from the last game. So Goku, Nick, Devi, and Tay were my party. The main character, Goku, is awakened by his father in the middle of the night, who explains he has to leave for a while. Daddy has to go buy a pack of cigs. So after leaving Goku with a Magi and instructing Goku to never lose it, he makes his way through Goku's open window and is gone for many years. Goku grows up and decides to go on a quest to find his father, and learns that his father was part of a secret group called the Guardians, who are hunting for the Magi, which are fragments of an ancient statue that give magic power to whoever gets the Magi. So Magi would be like, this is a strength Magi. My strength is up. This is a defense Magi. My defense is up, and I can equip them.
So what you're saying is, because it was a Game Boy game, they needed to use a word that was shorter than materia.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Like, what? Oh, 4 letters. That's perfect. Magi.
All right, so in the first world, your teacher, Mr. S., Mr. Slime, joins you for a little bit, leading you through a cave to begin your adventure. And then you go to town, see a guy that looks like your dad who runs away, and in the town you learn about a cleric named Ki and a villain named Ashura. So you go to the Shrine of Isis and meet Ki, who is a cute cleric, according to the guy in the town.
You go to the Shrine of Isis and become radicalized by Ki, the cute cleric.
Right.
You are an Isis bride, as it were. Greg's like, editing this part out. Thanks,
leaving it in because it's funny, but not commenting because, I'm looking at your American flag now and you're a citizen. They're listening to you.
They can't deport me for this kind of stuff.
Get
a warrant.
So after Ki heals you...
listen to our podcast.
So after Ki heals you, you ask her about Magi, and she reveals that a guy with a hat... And, the person who wrote this paragraph said, that might be your father.
I mean, to be fair, you're 0 for 1 for spotting Indiana Jones-looking dudes in hats who are your father.
Also, like the art for the game, he just straight up looks like Indiana Jones.
Yeah, that's why I said it.
Yeah, so the guy in the hat came in and also asked about Magi. As you turn to leave, she also tells you there's a secret cave. Oh, I had it in the notes. 4 steps east and 3 steps south of the big rock in the southern forest.
Ah, so close.
I had it in my notes. Sorry, dude.
I went 4 steps south and 3 steps east.
So you go to the Crystal Tower and transport yourself to Ashura's desert world. You explore the desert for a while, and eventually you reach Ashura's dungeon. And Ashura, major villain from the last game. In traditional Final Fantasy fashion, they repeat proper nouns of things from previous games and sort of just remix them. So Ashura was a villain late game in Final Fantasy Legend 1, and he's the first boss, or first major boss in Legend 2, and yeah, you just straight up kill Ashura early on. And then you go back.
Ashura's dungeon is a theme song from somewhere, right?
Probably.
Has Ashura been in other Final Fantasy games?
Assuredly he has. I don't know. They reuse a lot of deities.
Yeah.
And they do not care about how accurate they are to the myth. Leviathan. Here's the sea serpent. Bahamut. He's a dragon. Sure, why not? Like, wait, Bahamut's a fish. No, he's a dragon now.
Odin's like the guardian of the gateway to the dead, right? Close enough.
Actually, this is the most accurate Odin probably in the series, hanging out in Valhalla. But yeah, so you defeat Ashura, And then you go back to hang out with Key, and it turns out Key is sick. And you're like, oh no, we have to help our friend, sort of.
She's sick. We got to take her skateboard away.
I did not get that joke.
She's sick.
Oh, got it. 90s. Okay.
That's when this game's from, Greg.
Yeah. So you return to the Pillar of Sky, and you enter the giant world. All the sprites are friggin' huge. So
that makes sense.
And it was a fun gimmick in Mario Brothers 3. It's fun here. You sneak into Giant Town where everything's big. The houses are big. You're waiting for Fee Fi Fo Fum, but there's no giants. It's just an empty town. Everything's huge. And then you get
giant. It is a giant town. It is not a town of giants.
Right. Well, apparently giants used to live there, but then they just don't.
Then they learned about the square cube law, and they died.
Yeah. Should have mentioned this earlier, but earthquakes are a problem in all of the worlds. Comes up later. Earthquakes. Just remember, all the worlds are dealing with earthquakes.
Take that, the lead.
Yeah. So you go to the giant world, and you get a mini potion, which allows you to shrink down to size. And then you go into Key's body and, take out some viruses and stuff.
You like Fantastic Voyager?
Yeah, you Fantastic Voyage Key.
Nice.
The maps are very cutely shaped. So, like, the one that's like her hand, when you're in her hand, is shaped like a hand. Like, oh, look at these cute little maps. You take out the magi that are in her body. And also, she loses her powers because you take out the magi, but then you have more magi. Like, sweet, powers for us.
You just, yoinked out her magi. Oh.
Yeah. And we're like, well, we're going to leave you here and go on more adventures.
Is this why you were so hesitant when you called her your friend earlier in the plot?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, we just met this person.
I guess we'll save her life, but we're going to take her powers for our own purposes.
As one does. Still recovering from that bronchitis.
Bronchitis. It's a bronc bastard.
The only reason I actually got around to beating this game was because I was stuck at home with nothing to do. I wasn't, aware enough to, create music. or write. I'm like, I guess I'll just beat this Final Fantasy game. So I beat this while I was sick, last month.
I'm just, picturing trying to play, a sprite-based adventure RPG game while in a fever state. Just seems like the most uncomfortable thing ever. Because, if you fade out of consciousness, when you're sick, do you get, the fever dreams where you feel like you're in a maze? You're, just lost somewhere trying to find your way through a thing and you can't
That's
think
every
straight.
day of my life.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, whenever I get a fever, that's, what my dreams becomes. I got to find my way through, my parents' house, but I'm tiny.
Yeah, and I'm not... my thing was, when I was sick with bronchitis, I just was coughing nonstop and just couldn't function to do anything. Where the first few days I couldn't even watch movies. It was just nope, coughing all the time. Then I was able to okay,
subtitles.
I can watch Aquaman. Okay, now I can play Final Fantasy, and slowly building myself back up to being okay, now I'm human again.
Now I can rip a guitar solo.
I mean, still can't do that because of the bad wrist. But I can write a ripping guitar solo. And
I can MIDI a guitar solo.
I can play it on the piano with my right hand and then tell a guitar player, play this note for note, and really annoy them because what guitar players really love is being told note for note what to play.
Right?
The joy of being a Jim Steinman. Hey guys, I'm at best an okay vocalist, but I'm a really good songwriter, but also I'm going to write all these epics that are going to make people really uncomfortable to play. All right, so after that tangent, we're back at the video game. Back to Apollo's world, not Apollo Creed, unfortunately.
How about Apollo 13?
Not Apollo 13. So Apollo is a dude with long hair, a suit, white suit, and a cape. So
wait, is the character actually meant to be related to the god?
Well, they have the different gods of each world. So he is god of his own world. So
okay.
Ashura is a god of Ashura's own world, and we killed that god. And okay, your world no longer has a god. We're going to go up the tower and keep killing gods, I guess.
Wait, what are the implications of if a world's god is destroyed for the world?
We don't really know.
Oh, okay.
This is it's an early 90s Game Boy game. I mean, the fact that it has this much plot is impressive.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you meet Apollo, and he's actually pretty friendly. Hey, so I'm not evil, so just, do whatever, but like don't bother me. I've got other stuff to do. And we're like, all right, cool. And we hear rumors of a wind god, Donatus, and it's like, yeah, that dude's an asshole. Like, go mess with him. So you go to a town and you hear that you resemble the father of someone named Lynn. And so you're like, who's Lynn? Like, well, Lynn is this girl, and her mother is sick, and her father is missing, and so is Lynn, and you should go find her. And we're like, all right, well, it's a early 90s Game Boy game. Let's wander aimlessly.
So you're rescuing your half-sister from your father's other secret family?
So you go to the cave and you meet Lynn. But Donatus is in the way and she can't escape. So she joins your party and you kill Donatus. And then you get her home safely. I'm like, all right, well, goodbye, Lynn. I'm sure you're not related to me in any way. Then you hear rumors of a sea god named Neptune who is also totally an asshole. So you go to an underwater volcano, and like in FF1, if you step on the lava, you get hurt. But also like in FF1, there's no way for you to advance through the dungeon unless you step on the lava. So you bring a bunch of potions and heals with you, and you step on some lava, get some magi, and then you go to a cave called Bright Cave. And I will say the graphics in this game have much improved. So I was
noticing the non-square continents.
Yes, non-square continents. Bright Cave has a pretty cool design. It's kind of like flashing tiles. Looks pretty cool, but like not flashing like seizure-inducing. And there's some puzzles in there, and you get some magi. And then you're like, okay, we have enough magi to move on to the next world. Basic premise is like the last game where you need arbitrary item to move on to higher in the tower.
Right.
You need...
Collect the 3 colored keys to go to the next level.
You need this many magi to open this door. So, then you move on to the Guardians world.
Speaking of 90s video games. Just like all of them.
Right. So you find out Apollo has vanished, and you go to the Guardian town and learn that Guardians are people who protect the Magi. But people are suspicious of these outsiders who just showed up in town, so they throw you in jail. So basically, this game, Rambo 1, same thing.
Sure.
Same quality of storytelling.
That is such a tangential and ridiculous point that I don't even want to argue about it.
But then when you're in jail, your dad shows up and vouches for you and bails you out, as parents often do when their children end up in jail. In the millennial generation, I'm sure you all know this.
Right, you all been tossed in prison overnight. Your dad shows up and is like, I hope you learned your lesson about smoking.
Right.
Only I'm allowed to do that.
Yeah, so your dad shows up, bails you out, and people start calling him Captain. So your dad's like, I'll explain everything later. You rest, but then, oh no.
Your dad leaves in the middle of the night again.
No, in the middle of the night, there's an invasion, and the Magi is stolen, and your dad joins your party, and he's labeled as Dad in your
nice.
party. In battles.
It's that or Captain.
Yeah, it's that or Captain.
They say you can't be a captain unless you drive a boat, but he don't.
You confront
don't. Oh. That's for all you They Might Be Giants fans out there.
So you run across a commander who brags about kidnapping Lynn, and your dad is really upset about that for some reason.
Probably coincidence.
Then you go to another world, which I've just titled as Kidnapping World, because I don't know the name of this world, but it's literally a world where there's nothing in it except for this kidnapping sequence. No gods, no towns. There's like a forest, that's all that's on this planet for just this kidnapping sequence. So
it's like the worst anarchist manifesto ever. No gods, no masters, just forests and kidnapping.
Yep. So you run across a Lynn who's with a ninja. Then Lynn reveals that Dad is not her real dad, but her adoptive father after her real father vanished. So Dad, I'm just going to call him Dad because that's way more fun. So Dad lunges to rescue Lynn, and she escapes, but Dad dies in the process trying to rescue Lynn. And so the party seeks revenge and kills the ninja. And then Lynn returns back.
Wait, I missed a step. Why was the ninja trying to kill... the ninja had kidnapped Lynn?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So then Lynn returns to Apollo's world, and we learn that her father was a guardian, and so that's how her dad knows Dad.
Oh, okay.
So that's how dad knows dad.
There's dad jokes everywhere.
All right, so are you following so far the narrative?
I'm a little bit disappointed that the secret family was an adopted secret family and not that this dude was arbitrarily a polygamist.
That's what I was really rooting for. All right, so
more JRPGs need polygamy.
I mean, yeah.
Polygamy.
I mean, look, we're recording for a Utah-based Final Fantasy podcast.
More Final Fantasy games need polygamy, and the word of our Lord Jesus Christ is delivered to the Americans.
Was that a low blow? I don't know.
Are the guys who run this podcast actually Mormons? LDS, sorry.
I think former.
Okay.
But also, I think every Final Fantasy podcaster from Utah is a former LDS.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm not touching that any further. I know some very nice Mormons.
You're not touching it any further because you're not Catholic.
Hey! All right.
We're just gonna burn all the all the religions.
Burn everything like the Catholics did.
Okay, so we've made jokes about ISIS and Catholicism and LDS.
All right. So just for clarification, I'm against ISIS. I am open to Catholicism and Mormonism. Very nice, pleasant people. Some of my favorite people in the world are Mormons. I've gone to Mormon services. They're nice. They're nice.
I'm a Protestant. The rest of all y'all are heretics,
I mean, you're not...
This was a really good opportunity for you to, pull a good cop to my bad cop kind of thing, Greg.
And
instead we're just bad cop, worst cop.
It's like, oh shoot, Greg's real opinion was about to come out.
So back to theocide.
Yeah, so my eyes are tearing up. I can't read my notes because I'm just overwhelmed with the Spirit of the Lord right now.
See, I thought it was allergies.
All right, so speaking of gods, we go to Venus's world. And so you reach a...
Venus's world, not to be confused with Venus.
Right. And so you reach a gated city. It's a utopia with a ton of technology. It's a very efficient, well-run city where there's the streets are almost like the things at the airport, the ramps that move so you can speed up and go places faster.
Yeah.
So traffic is very efficient, and everyone there is very attractive and good-looking.
Of course, Venus lives in a Stepford Wives gated community.
Right.
That bougie asshole.
Lots of earthquake problems here. But otherwise, it looks like a perfect paradise. Everyone's attractive and gets to work on time. What's not to love? The robots will not let you leave the city, though, once you enter it. And so you go to Venus, and you're like, what the heck? We want to leave. And she's like, that's fine. Go ahead. And you're like, oh, well, that was very easy. I thought this would be more difficult. But all right, cool. Thanks. But then you run across...
Good conflict.
Yeah, that's a very good conflict. But then you run across a couple characters named Nils and Flora. Both very attractive, good-looking people.
Right, they live in Venus Town.
Right. But Flora is upset because she doesn't want to marry Nils, but they have an arranged marriage. Flora wants to marry Leon, but Leon was exiled from Venus Town because he hurt his leg. And because he hurt his leg, he was no longer perfect and beautiful.
Yep.
It's like, oh no, you're walking with a slight limp. Get out of Perfect Town.
You're riding the conveyor belts with a slight limp. That's always the trick with these utopias is like they're perfect, until you have a disability or...
Right, even though it's disability friendly, which is why it's weird.
Right, it's super accessible.
Anyway, so there's another earthquake, and then a volcano appears because of an earthquake. Just rises up from the ground.
I mean, that's plate tectonics. That's just science.
Yeah, so scientifically accurate. This is science fiction, not fantasy.
Hard science fiction.
Hard science fiction. And so then you go to Dirty Town, where you meet Leon, who is very attractive and good looking, aside from,
Aside from the limp.
See, aren't you glad I'm going into great detail into this?
Dirty Town, where we exile those bastards like Limpy Leon over there.
See, you get to experience this entire game without having to play a JRPG.
Without having to grind tigers all the time.
Yeah, so see, I'm helping you out.
I appreciate it.
So, Leon's like, I'm going to win Flora back somehow. I'm like, okay, well, we're getting out of Dirty Town because it's too dirty for us. So you leave Dirty Town.
The way to win Flora back is just like break her knee, really.
Yeah. You explore the volcano to get some magi, but then Leon steals your magi. And for some reason
like one of those bastards from Dirty Town would.
Right. And you can't catch up with him for some reason, even though he has a limp. You'd think he'd be able to oh, hey.
He's just hobbling so fast. This pampered man who grew up riding conveyor belts for his entire life and now can't even walk right because of an injury. He's just so fast.
Yeah, so you're wondering what he could want to do with the Magi. And so you go to Nils and Flora's wedding, which is being officiated by Venus. And Leon crashes the wedding and attacks Venus and I'm going to kill you. And fails because he's a guy with a limp fighting a god. And so he gets wounded by Venus. And then Flora decides to slash her face and scar her face. So she slashes her face so that she can be with her true love. And, she'd rather be flawed with the man she loves than be perfect with someone she doesn't. And,
there's probably a message there, but it's probably also bullshit. So who cares?
Right. So then we do what we do and we just kill Venus, kill the god.
I'm here to collect magi and commit theocide, and I'm all out of magi.
So then after we kill Venus, Leon and Flora reunite and decide they will marry each other. And then Nils is just a good sport about it. It's like, you know what?
She's ugly now. I didn't want her anyway.
And I'm very attractive in this city full of attractive people. I'll be all right. I will be okay.
I'll date one of these robot Stepford wives.
The next world you go to is Race World, which is about, fast sports.
Okay.
God damn it. All right.
We danced around it the entire time with the gated community conversation. So sports world, you're saying?
Yeah, so sports world. All right. Racism is bad.
It's true, it is.
Just making sure that's very clear. I'm open to all faiths as long as you are kind to others and don't oppress people. And racism is bad. All right, so you go to Sports World, as I'm calling it, and you find out that Apollo is living in this world and hosting a dragon race with Magi as the prize.
I mean, Apollo and Hermes are the same guy, right? Depending on if you're Greek or Roman, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, so he's sort of known for
Actually, no, I think they're
fast.
different. I don't know. Man, I'm not as familiar with that.
Man, if only I had the internet in my pocket.
And, I should know this because I just read the Iliad.
You did.
Yeah. Whew. Don't I feel embarrassed for not remembering that? So there are a series of sheds in the town where you get to pick your dragon. The faster dragons are more expensive to rent. And the cheapest dragon, I think the guy just lets you ride for free. He's like, yeah, just whatever, take my dragon. No one likes him.
Of course.
Oh, in this town, you can also buy dragon armor here, which is the best armor in the game and what you should wear for the rest of the game. And if you sell off your dragon armor, it is a very terrible decision, like I did. Dragon armor is resistant to fire, ice, thunder, and poison, and has very high defense.
So that's why I died. Okay, no, Hermes and Apollos are both Greek.
I thought they were different. All right, so you do the dragon race, get some magi, and then you return to the Pillar of Sky, and then you go to what's called Edo World, which basically just means you go to Japan. And I like that a Japanese game company stereotyped themselves so well.
Right?
Where, you can't even call it racist because, that'd be like if we...
That would be like us accusing the Burger King sneaking game of being racist.
Right.
How dare you stereotype us Americans as being fat and eating too much stupid food.
Right. Or if we made a video game where it's a bunch of different fantasy worlds and then we went to New York world. Here's a world where everyone wears, red, white, and blue top hats. and defends freedom.
Right. It's hard to satirize Americans when we do it so well ourselves.
Right.
Wolverines!
The best satirization I saw of, Americans from Japan was Gintama, actually. Where there is one character who gets injured in a race, and then they replace him with a body double. But the body double looks nothing like the characters, where they got this blonde, ripped dude with a Speedo, sunglasses, long hair, a mustache, American flag headband, and carrying a baguette.
Is that Bandit Keith? Did you just describe Bandit Keith?
But in a Speedo with a baguette. And they're just like, that guy's clearly an American. I'm just like, I don't know what the baguette has to do with anything, but I appreciate that.
Freedom.
I just appreciate that they just interpreted Americans as just like ripped, long-haired dudes with, baguettes and Speedos.
Well, I mean, we stole it from another country.
Right. That's fair.
USA.
All right, so you go to Edo World, and you start off in Northtown. The townspeople mention that Ichigoya has the best weapons around. You also learn that bananas are illegal, and the Hatamotos are a troubling gang that has taken over the streets of all the towns. Now, when they say bananas are illegal, I don't know what the Japanese version is, but I sense that's like an American censorship thing. Like, that's got to be heroin. This has got to be opioids. But
maybe.
But according to
they just they saw that one Monty Python's Flying Circus sketch and were like, oh man, bananas are a dangerous weapon if you don't have a gun.
Yeah, so bananas illegal. So you meet up with some Hatamotos on a bridge and fight them, as you do, because that's just what you do as an JRPG. Like, oh look, bad guys, I fight them. But then a local Detective Hana, breaks up the fight. Hana being a female detective. And then you go back to...
What?
She has a male love interest later, so just, I don't know, felt like letting the listeners know.
That Hannah, totally not gay. Just had to clarify that.
I mean, it was the early 90s. It wasn't that ambitious.
Right.
I mean, we just got an openly gay character in Avengers Endgame.
I like the idea of, describing a JRPG as not that ambitious.
In terms of... breaking down social norms in the early 90s.
Right.
So, all right, so you go to East Town, and you're at Hana's house, and you find out that Hana's father was murdered, and you also find rumors that Ichigoya is smuggling bananas. And weapons. But mostly the bananas are the big deal. So, Hana suspects that Ichigoya is doing this, and you meet a couple other people in town, like Taro, the school teacher, and Kame, the old wise turtle who looks over Hana. So you go to Ichigoya's shop, you go back to Northtown, and you do what you do, and you threaten him with violence, and he reveals that the bananas are in the harbor. No talk about how he gets all his sweet weapons for very low prices, but he tells you where the bananas are. So you go to the harbor. Kame tells you that Hana went in alone to investigate the smuggled bananas. It's a very serious plot about bananas.
See, I'm just thinking of the other slightly more recent cultural touchstone about bananas would be 300. So just every time they say banana, I'm thinking banana hammocks. So he's smuggling bananas. Maybe in a hammock.
Perhaps.
Hannah's really obsessed with bananas.
All right, so you find Hana and Taro in the boat, and they have proof of the banana smuggling. So Hana joins you as you go to the Imperial Court, and the judge is like, oh, shoot, banana smuggling? We've got to investigate this. So sends officers to investigate, and then Ichigoya is brought before the court and denies the accusations, and the totally not corrupt officer reveals that there were no bananas there, so he didn't do anything, and he goes free. And Hana's like, I'm pretty sure the court is corrupt. Taro arrives with Kame and explains he snuck onto the ship. So Kame got injured trying to sneak onto the ship, and then an officer arrives and asks where Kame is, and Hana explains that the older, wiser turtle, it's payday, so he's probably on a hot date somewhere. That is actually in the game. It's payday, so he's probably taking some chick out. So I appreciate that the turtle is just bad with money, but good with the ladies.
I mean, I suppose. If only modern turtles were as good with the ladies, maybe they'd be less endangered.
Right.
Tear.
The officer leaves and tells Hana to give up on this banana investigation, that it's too dangerous. Hana joins the party, and the party goes to Ichigoya's shop, and then they go into the back room where Ichigoya and the Shogun are bragging about their success smuggling bananas. And weapons, but mostly bananas. You bust in, the Shogun flees, and you beat up Ichigoya, and then you go back to Hana's house where Kame the turtle is still recovering, and then Taro reveals himself to be a guardian. You mentioned that your father was the captain, and he's like, oh shoot, I love your dad, he's awesome, how's he doing? Like, oh, he's dead. That's really disappointing. Well, let's go kill the Shogun. And avenge your father's death. And Hana's father's death. And all the father's deaths. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure.
Let's avenge all the father's deaths. You realize my dad's death was totally unrelated to this plot, right? It was in a different world.
It was a ninja. Where do you think the ninja came from?
Oh, snap. What?
It's actually not explained very well, but I think that's what they're getting at. So you battle the Shogun, you kill the Shogun, and then the Shogun's dad appears, and then you kill him. And then, all right, sweet. Now we've just left the society without a political system.
Well...
So you go back to Hana's house, and it's revealed that Hana and Tara are in love, and you leave with some magi. Next world.
That was incredibly convoluted.
Yeah, that is the most complicated plot section in the game. All about bananas.
All about banana smuggling.
All right, so the next world is an optional world you can skip. Basically, it's called Nasty Dungeon. It's a really hardcore dungeon with some good equipment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Side quest dungeon. You can skip it and go straight to Valhalla.
I feel like you can skip any of these dungeons and go straight to Valhalla.
Well, the thing is, but you actually explore Valhalla. Like, when you die and you just run across Odin, you don't explore Valhalla. It's like, hey, do you want to try again? This time you explore the world of Valhalla and run to Odin's like, I've seen you do a bunch of battles and I've been looking forward to fighting you. Let's do this. And so you defeat Odin, you kill Odin, and you're like, oh, wait, we won't be able to revive anymore now that we've killed Odin. So, like, if we lose, it's actual game over from here on out. Have to go back to our last save.
Oh, interesting.
But Odin is totally cool with this. Like, yeah, I just wanted to die an awesome warrior's death, so this is rad. Like, he is, what's the expression, D to D, down to die?
Bad news, Greg. There's like a dozen of these games.
What, Final Fantasy Legend?
Well, there's only 3 that are called Final Fantasy Legend, but there's about a dozen Saga games.
I am not doing all the Saga games.
Okay.
And here's why, UFF listeners. Number 1, I have a life. That's part 1. Part 2 is I'm going to use Joe and Kaleb logic, where they're like, it has to be commercially released in the U.S. to play. And so since a bunch of the Saga games did not come out in the United States, I don't have to play them.
I think a bunch of them did.
A bunch of them did. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to beat FF Legend 3. We're derailing the story section, but, you know.
It's true.
Whatever. I'm going to beat FF Legend.
Talk about this while I try to figure out what bananas were actually a stand-in for.
All right. I'm going to beat FF Legend 3. And, because I want to have the 3 FF Legend games done before the weekly show ends. Because I think that's every game that's called Final Fantasy, you know, should be a part of UFF before the weekly show ends. And then after that, Joe and Kaleb, they're doing their, they're playing like games that were what they call almost Final Fantasy. So they're playing Chrono Trigger and Secret of Mana and like spin-off series Kingdom Hearts. But the show's not going to be weekly anymore. They're just going to do it whenever they beat the game. So I might do the first Saga game then. But like, I've got too much stuff going on to commit to playing all the Saga games. And I only really want to play the first one because they straight up just use Final Fantasy sprites in that one. So I want to play like the last one where they're cribbing on Final Fantasy. And then when it's like actually becoming its own thing is when I'm not interested anymore. All right, so Steve, did you find out?
Yeah, I looked it up, and I found at least one source saying that if you literally translate the text of the original Japanese game, it does in fact say opium. But there's also the thought that bananas for much of the 20th century were in fact a luxury import item in Japan. So theoretically, smuggling bananas is actually coherent.
But it's definitely opium.
Right. It's almost certainly actually opium. Which implies the existence of fantasy Britain somewhere in this universe.
Ooh, interesting. I'm going to say that the fact that there's opium smuggling kind of makes this game pretty edgy for 1990.
I guess, sort of, except for the fact that there wasn't actually opium in the version that reached us.
But edgy for Japan.
Yeah. I don't know, like, how touchy people are about drugs and their children's entertainment in Japan.
I'm not sure. I'm not certain about that either. But anyway, we move on to the next world, which I have labeled as Next World because I don't remember the name of it. I think it's called Final World. So, you encounter Apollo, and he explains that the party has gathered 76 Magi, but he has the final one. And he explains he's allowed the party to gather the Magi so he wouldn't have to get them himself.
Oh, betrayal.
So you have a boss battle against Apollo's minion, and then Apollo reveals that he has kidnapped Taro, Hana, Flora, Leon, Lynn's mother, probably your mother, I don't know, he has like a whole bunch of people he's kidnapped. Like, look at all these people I've kidnapped.
I have everyone's mothers, ah ha ha.
And so the party gives Apollo the Magi. But then Dad shows up. He's not dead, and reveals there is one Magi left, and that all the Guardians spread a rumor that there were 77 Magi, but there's actually a 78th one, and they just lied throughout the entire game as a protective measure, so to protect the last Magi.
I feel like your dad lies a lot.
Which one? Mine or the one in the game?
I mean, your dad, Greg, is a lawyer, so we sort of take it as a given.
Right.
But, you know, your dad in the game, he's...
Yeah, I mean, my dad's job is to lie.
Right.
But yeah, so how do you feel about that twist? That the game has told you throughout that there's only 77, there's only 77. Like, no, there's actually a secret one. We only said 77 in case some asshole tried to collect them.
I mean, this seems a pretty obvious twist.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that I was pretty sure the game said 66.
All the notes say 77.
So that's the real twist.
Right? The real twist is Steve can't read.
Ha! The real twist is illiteracy.
So Dad joins the party. There is now constant earthquake, so your Game Boy screen is shaking all the time.
Oh, that's what that was.
Yes. And the party goes to the final cave, and it's actually a pretty cool area where there's like all these talking mask heads throughout the cave. So it's a very cool visual, especially for Game Boy. Like it's very cool looking for Final Fantasy fans. A couple of you might be listening to this podcast. If you remember the Bartandless fight from Final Fantasy 13, the talking heads look like that. That was my wife's least favorite part of Final Fantasy 13 because I lost that boss battle many times, and there's like a choir going on in the background, so it's like the heads are singing, and she's like, this is creepy, this fight is long, I don't like this character, I hate basically everything that's happening right now. And this is like your 30th time trying this boss, and each battle takes like 30 minutes.
That is a lot of hours, like 15 hours of battling that boss.
Yeah, no, it was a long time. And then I just, looked up new strategies online and then beat him. But yeah, so you beat a boss called the War Mech, which was a hidden super boss in FF1. You get the last Magi, and you go back to the pillar, and you battle Apollo, who transforms using the Magi. Apollo does a really powerful attack that would destroy the entire party, but Goku's dad protects everyone and takes the damage. And it looks like, oh no, Dad's dying, but for real this time. But wait. The party decides to use the Magi and Dad to try and save him, even though the Magi, when used on Apollo, corrupted him and turned him into a horrifying monster that lost his humanity. Let's try it on Dad.
That's worth it.
Like, whatever. If he dies, he dies. You use the 78 Magi, and the goddess Isis appears. She shows her goddess mercy and saves your dad. Like, no, don't use the Magi. That's going to kill him. Let me just do it. And tells you that you need to go to the center of the world to fix the broken security system. Because she needs help because she can't solo it because there's some strong monsters in the final dungeon. So it turns out all of these worlds are connected through, like, advanced technology and some kind of security system, and we need to disable it to stop the earthquakes.
We need to get to the panel and type in the code before ADT calls the cops on us, and then we get that whole embarrassing thing.
So
we're Japanese, they'll just shoot us.
The all-powerful goddess Isis joins your party, and you go through a really long final dungeon with tons of random battles, extremely high encounter rate, and you can't run from any of them. And they are very difficult. The dungeon is basically a straight line, so keeping that Final Fantasy 13 theme going, you're going through the hallway.
My favorite Final Fantasy games are the ones where you just walk in a straight line till the next dialogue section.
Yep, and then the last phase is a maze, which is super fun with a really high encounter rate, where you can't run from any of the battles.
Now, when you say fun,
I was being sarcastic.
All right.
High encounter rates are annoying.
Right.
And apparently this is one of the most difficult Final Fantasy games.
Oh.
So, for the hardcore players who like a challenge, here you go. And then you finally reach the security system, and Isis is like, okay, so there's two halves of the security system. I'll take the right one, you take the left one. Because Isis is so powerful, she can solo one of them, but it takes four of us to do what she can solo.
Mm-hmm.
And so the final boss is the Arsenal. After the Arsenal falls, Isis resumes her goddess form, thanks you for your help, and tells you that she has to stay to repair the world and the security system. And she tells you that legends will always remember your battles of the security system, and your descendants will need to learn these lessons so that history does not repeat itself. So she reactivates the teleporter to the left of the battle area and sends you back home.
Legends will always remember your deeds, and by that I mean like 30 years from now, some nerds will talk about you on the internet, but not much.
This is actually maybe the most popular of the Final Fantasy Gameboy games.
Oh, yeah?
And actually, when I looked at like YouTube reviews and just like random reviews on the internet, they were all pretty positive on this one and saying it's the best of the trilogy. But we'll get to that section in a bit. I have to go through the ending. So you see your father has recovered from his injuries and is waiting for you. So you talk to him, and he fills his promise of finally going home with you. As you go through the credits, you see that all your friends from your adventures are, home, safe, and happy. And you get home, your father comes to you in the middle of the night like, hey, so I found out there's this thing called the Lost Ark. So I'm going to leave. And
Does he really?
Yes.
Okay.
And Goku's like, nah, man, I'm going with you. And then your mom shows up like, oh, hell no. I'm going with you. Family vacation. The end.
See, I was going to make a crack about, like, as soon as you arrive at the house, your dad crumples up his empty box of cigarettes and says, I'm going to go into the store. I'll be right back.
I mean, no, he has to go get the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, I caught that. So, does that make you short round? That's rough. That's not a good character to be.
Yeah, so what do you think of the story, Steve?
It was long and convoluted and would have taken, I feel like, a long time to actually plow through the game to get to all that, because there was, as with many of these JRPGs, a lot of grinding.
Yeah, so my thing with this game's story is that it is told better than Final Fantasy Legend, but actually Final Fantasy Legend had a better story. The idea that the characters were wanting to enter paradise just as like a human desire to like reach heaven is, I think, a visceral thing. Like, the Tower of Babel. Mm-hmm. And so I think just like that mythological edge made it more interesting. I think the individual villains throughout were more interesting, like the entire, Cloud World, where you joined the Empire for a bit and were, a spy for the rebels was interesting. The post-apocalyptic world had a more interesting story. And so even though Legend had worse execution, its ideas were better and the world was more interesting. And so I think that ultimately, like, Legend had a better story.
I feel like False Utopia World sounds like a much better world to visit for a brief adventure than, any of the other worlds in these series.
False Utopia, I would say, the Venus world, I think, maybe had the best, like, story for an individual world.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would say, like, the Cloud world was really good. I don't know. I like Cloud worlds in general, though, so that might be a bias towards liking Cloud worlds. But, the Cloud world, like, the fact that, like, there were the different mechanics the Legend 1 introduced, where, like, when you go to the future robot world that was destroyed by Bird Monster, and when you encounter Bird Monster, you can't defeat Bird Monster, you have to run, and they made that, like, a gameplay mechanic. Mm-hmm. I thought, like, added more character to the world, as opposed to, like, yeah, in this world, this god's the asshole, just, like, go find him and kill him. And that was, like, for every world versus, the one Cloud world where, like, the one god was leader of the Empire. So, like, they did a better job of incorporating them into the world as characters, I thought.
Speaking of going to different worlds and just being like, this god's an asshole, kill him, how's his Dark Materials treating you?
I I haven't had time to really read it in the past week, just because I've been so busy. I finished the Journal of John Woolman, and super religious dude. Like when he's on his deathbed, that chapter was dark. And I had to listen to like some Katy Perry to shift my mood after that, because it was so freaking dark. Like I need some like lightweight pop, because that was like me like thinking about my mortality way too much. Like I was cool with like, yeah, slavery is bad and we should give the Indians back their land. Like, yeah, rolling with this book. Jesus is cool. Rolling. Oh yeah, you're entering the darkness and the void. I only have so much time left on this earth, and I just spent a bunch of time like reading your thoughts. And the vast majority of people I know will never have this experience because they don't care about the Journal of John Woolman. I am experiencing art that most people don't care to consume, even though you're saying something important. The vast majority of people I know will not be able to relate to this content. I spent this amount of time in my life on something that no one else will relate to. I'm going to die, and is reading the Journal of John Woolman worth it? But also, you know, I want someone to savor your existence and appreciate that you lived and fought for good things. And if no one appreciates your existence hundreds of years after you're gone, will people appreciate my existence hundreds of years after I'm gone? Fuck it. Okay.
Good news. The vast majority of all human endeavor is already forgotten and will never be recovered.
That's true. And so that's why I listened to Katy Perry singing about how she wants to see her peacock cock.
Really? Golly.
I needed to just turn it off.
You're like, I don't drink, so the closest I can get to that sort of experience of just like inflicting brain damage on myself to make the pain of existence going away is listening to Katy Perry.
Hey, look, it's catchy pop. I also do think, now that I think about it, that is a giant tonal shift from reading about John Woolman, like in his last thoughts before, you know, meeting his creator, and then Katy Perry singing about singing your peacock cock.
Golly. I haven't heard that particular Katy Perry song, so basically you just reference any Katy Perry song since I Kissed a Girl, and I'll be like, not really surprised, but just further disappointed.
You might actually like One of the Boys. It's like a pop punk song about how she wants to be like both respected as like an equal in friendship, but also like still like respected as like a lady. So I like that song.
So it's like Katy Perry covering "Man, I Feel Like a Woman."
Yes, but it's actually stripped, like it's done with pop punk production. It's a pop punk song. I liked it.
I'm an American, so now I can say bad things about Canadians. Man, I Feel Like a Woman is a terrible song. And Shania Twain is awful.
100% disagree. It's a fantastic song. Also, here's how I know you're still Canadian. Hey, Celine Dion sucks.
Hey, I will fight you.
See? And
Celine Dion is a national treasure.
She is a national treasure. Unlike you, I'm still loyal to the crown, Steve.
I just feel conflicted because, you know, I got both citizenships. I'm like, wait, do I love the queen or want to smash the monarchy?
But yeah, so that's story. Ready to move on to gameplay?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Alright, so gameplay. It's the same as the last one.
Huzzah!
So it's first-person JRPG like Dragon Quest, not like Final Fantasy where you see the sprites on the screen.
Oh, the combat, you mean?
Yeah, the combat. So
the overworld is still the same as ever.
Overworld is the same. They still use the modified Final Fantasy 1 sprites, which are now modified Final Fantasy Legend sprites. So, you know, they're further diluting and modifying. Let's see what I've got here for notes for the gameplay. Got the robot character class. That's a new addition. Wasn't in the last game. So robots, their fun gimmick is that they're super strong. And when you equip that's still disposable weapon inventories. So when you buy a sword, you have 50 swords, like a spell. And once you use up all 50 swords, all right, you got to go buy another sword. But if you equip weapons on your robot, the weapon is divided in half. So you have a sword with 50. You give it to the robots, like, oh, half of them are gone. You only have 25 swords now. But when you go to an inn, the robot automatically revives all of the missing weapon stats. So you don't have to keep buying weapons for the robots. It's just they have less uses in individual battles. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. The monster meat system is back, so if you have a monster in your party, it can eat the meat of monsters and then turn into different monsters. And it's a very convoluted, complex system where oftentimes you will eat meat and become a weaker monster, and your moves will suck, and the only way to do it is with a guide. Moving on, mutants are back. They level up randomly like last time. Humans are back. They level up like in Final Fantasy II, where you keep doing a thing and then you get better at doing the thing. So like, I'm going to keep attacking. I'm better with attack. I keep getting hit. All right, I have more health now. So there's no character levels. There's stat levels. So it's FF2 all over again, including when you attack an enemy and then the enemy is dead. Your characters will not, if they're already selected to attack that same enemy and that enemy disappears, they just do nothing. They're just like, oh, the thing I was going to attack is dead. I guess I'll just stand here and waste my turn. Steve enjoyed that very much.
Huzzah! Yeah, I love that kind of mechanic.
Yeah, they get rid of it for the next game, so it's a plus. I don't think I mentioned this in the last game, but continuing the tradition of Final Fantasy II, the inns charge based upon the amount of damage you've taken. So the more health you need to recover, the more they're going to charge you, because they don't, if you're going to bleed all over the sheets, they're going to charge you for more sheets. We mentioned the extremely high encounter rate, keeping that old school tradition of just move a step, battle, move a step, battle. 4-person party, but sometimes you get a guest character that you get to control, so like Key or your dad or Mr. S.
Mr. S.
Yeah, so most of the difficulty in the game comes from the number of enemies you fight at once, where like you will fight 9 gang members and 10 crabs and 4 ninjas all at the same time. It's like that. It's just an obscene number of enemies you're facing, and the mechanic you want to do to counter that is just magic them.
Spam AoE attacks.
Yes. If you have a magic user, which is your mutant, they usually have spells that will attack entire groups of enemies or every single enemy on screen. Like I said, we mentioned the retry option with Odin, but that retry option is no longer available after you defeat Odin. Yeah, gameplay not that different from the last one. I mean, the robot class is a fun addition. Robots are fun.
Robots are fun.
But yeah, I don't really have too much to say about the gameplay. It's kind of the same as the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to music and graphics. So the music in this one composed by Kenji Ito and Nobuo Uematsu. And by composed by Nobuo, I mean they brought back like 2 of his themes from the last game. And like, hey, yeah, he composed for this. He totally put in work for this game. Active work, and we didn't just use the same tracks.
We paid him to be in this game.
He like knew this game was coming out. So yeah, this was Kenji's first video game score, and he later worked on Final Fantasy Adventure, which was reviewed by Joe and Kaleb. So this ties into another Final Fantasy game, guys. You should have played it.
You should play every game by any person who's ever been employed by any production house making a Final Fantasy game.
Well, I would say that if they're doing a Final Fantasy completionist series, you have a trilogy of games called Final Fantasy. I don't know. Yeah. So the next one, I don't want to get too much into the next one, but there's so much like direct connection to the series that the next one does, where it's like, oh yeah, they definitely should have played this one, but aren't going to. But yeah, so the score is very repetitive.
50-0.
Yeah. No, I was saying the music score.
Right.
It's a very repetitive feeling score. There's not much music given the length of the game. It's not utilized in a way where it feels repetitive.
Yeah.
There are ways they probably could have mixed it up more, but they don't. So even though I'd say the score is maybe a little bit better than the first one, it feels more repetitive, so it's extra annoying.
And Square also really like dominates the sound of the system. Like there's not really much sound going on other than the music constantly.
Yeah, but I would say the graphics and presentation have been greatly improved.
Yeah, they put some effort into map design and things like that.
The map design looks great. The cutscenes are great. There's like a lot of creativity with the map design. Like, the earthquake effect looks cool. So they utilized a lot of they utilized the Game Boy's graphics very well, and it's a very good looking game. So as far as like Game Boy graphics, I'd say it's near the top of the heap. Like utilizing the technology that the system had available.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very limited.
It's still Game Boy.
It's still Game Boy, but for a Game Boy game, it's actually pretty impressive. Where the first one was like annoying, which is like, this is just a white square. How much work did you put into a white square?
Right.
There's like nuance and texture, and like when you're in the crystal tower, like the tiles kind of sparkle and there's stars in the background, and like when you teleport, like the stars move with you, and just it actually has like visuals that impress you, and you're like, oh, I'm more immersed in this world. So the graphics far improved, and the devs are clearly more comfortable working on a Game Boy, as opposed to their first Game Boy game where they didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
So next up would be listener questions and reading other reviews. I posted a couple of threads on Facebook and basically just got a bunch of people saying, I really liked the game and didn't have any questions. But a bunch of people saying, I was really nostalgic towards this and I loved this game and I put a bunch of hours into it. I don't have Facebook open right now, but all you people, thank you for responding but not really giving me reviews or questions like I asked. You just said you liked it, which, okay, I count that as a review. Every single person who commented said they liked it a lot. So, good for you. I'm sure that's not just nostalgia talking, and that you had no other RPGs for the Game Boy other than Pokemon, and you were desperate for an RPG on the Game Boy. I'm sure you just sincerely think it's quality, and there's no nostalgia speaking.
And I appreciate you guys not making Greg read a bunch of questions that, I don't know, it sounds like that could get tedious.
I mean, it's part of the format of the show.
That's true.
And, if people had questions about it, like to answer, because questions are people who are, either A, curious about the game and see if they want to give it a shot, or B, never going to play it and just like, hey, just tell me this thing so I don't have to play the game.
Right, don't have to play it or look it up myself.
Right. But yeah, guess we're moving to the Legacy.
They made a third one.
Yes.
And then another dozen.
Yeah, continued the legacy of Final Fantasy II and Final Fantasy Legend. And then, got a sequel and a whole bunch of other games because the Saga series continued and was really successful.
And by continued, I mean, the last game was 3 years ago.
Yeah, so that's
still probably going.
Still going. So as of January 2009, the game has sold an estimated 850,000 copies in Japan, which is pretty good considering Japan's a small country. And this is just a Game Boy game. So those are pretty solid numbers.
Yeah.
In March 2006, it was voted the 94th best game of all time by readers for Famitsu magazine. So, I mean, 94 out of 100, that's low, but still, to be remembered even in 2006 and considered as one of the best games of all time.
Yeah.
That's
not bad.
That's not bad. There was a Nintendo DS remake, which I've seen pictures of. Got a 31 out of 40 from Famitsu magazine when it was reviewed. Well reviewed in North America. Oh, it was nominated for Most Challenging Game Boy Game of 1991.
Nominated for Most Challenging Game Boy Game. Then somebody ported Dark Souls.
Yeah, and it was really weird, how early that Dark Souls port came. Everyone forgot about it. They're porting Dark Souls to everything, man. But yeah, so the legacy of this game is when we talked about the legacy of Soul of Rebirth, there wasn't much legacy. We talked about the legacy of Legend 1. We were surprised that it sold well and led to the Saga series. But this is the first one where like, I've heard, like, people have brought this game up to me independently. Like, other people have brought this game up to me without me having to bring it up to them. So I count that as having a legacy. In the sense that, like, I don't hear a bunch of other people bring up the, Sylvester Stallone movie Oscar too often. And so I consider that, like, that's like a weird niche Greg thing. Except someone brought up the Stallone movie Oscar to me today, and I was super excited, like, oh, someone else saw that movie, it's so good.
To be fair, they weren't bringing it up in a good context. They were just like, it's the least terrible of his, it's better than these other ones, which are very bad.
She was saying that she liked Oscar and Tango and Cash. She was being positive. And also, Oscar is like a really great screwball comedy. I told you about that one, right? It's the one where, like, Stallone plays a mob boss trying to go legit. It's done by the guy who did Ghostbusters, the same director. So it's like, it has that, like, and Trading Places. I'm forgetting the guy's name. But, like, it has that, like, 80s fast-witted comedy. And so Tim Curry plays like an English instructor who tries to teach Stallone how to speak properly. And, like, no, enunciate. And so, like, it's really hilarious, like, Stallone poking fun at himself and Tim Curry just, like, their banter back and forth. Like, it's sincerely very funny movie. But, as we're talking about things that only I care about, this is a game that apparently a lot of people care about. Like, I got a lot of responses on that Facebook thread. None of them were, like, really super intelligent responses that actually answered the questions that I had or, like, the thesis of my post. But still, a lot of people flocked to it and said they loved the game. So, I think a lot of people played it because there weren't too many RPG options on the Game Boy.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking, like, in terms of bang for your buck, a JRPG on the Game Boy is going to be a lot of game time.
I mean, that was kind of a big appeal of RPGs in general, is that
you only had 3 video games. The one that took you 60 hours was most
worth
valuable.
It. Yeah. And also the one where it's like, I went through this epic story and I, learned things about myself. Like, I'm imagining being a kid, having a Super Nintendo, playing Final Fantasy IV, and, like, the arc of the main character being like, I am a dark knight, I have committed genocide, burned villages to the ground, orphaned children, and am going on a quest of redemption to try to save people and, find forgiveness in my soul. And it's going to take you, the player, 60 hours to complete this this quest. Like, you're going to feel really good about that purchase. Like, all right, that was a good $40, I guess. So, this obviously isn't on that same level storytelling-wise. But, yeah, I mean, as far as bang for your buck, I think it's a solid Game Boy game, but So here's the thing. Even though it's way better presentation-wise than the first one, I don't know if I really recommend this to, like, a casual player. Or, like, even a huge RPG fan. I don't think there's enough unique elements to make it worth it unless you're just doing a completionist run of the series.
Right. At this point in history, your options for game on your portable device that you can pull out when you're bored, there's a lot more of them.
You can get Final Fantasy 13 on your smartphone.
Right.
And you can get even Final Fantasy 15 on your smartphone. Granted, it's the mobile version where they're all chibi and people hate the look of it. You can still get FF15 on your smartphone. So the trick is with older RPGs, the story has to be really good for it to be worth it. And I think some old RPGs have stories that are worth it. This one, the story is not worth it. I can watch an older film from the 40s if the story is really good and look past some of the technical limitations of filmmaking. And I can do that with older video games if the story is worth it. I don't think the story for this one is ultimately worth it. And I would say if you didn't grow up with it, skip it.
Yeah.
So now comes the part where we rank it. And I realize that this is continuing the legacy of FF2. I'm going to include FF2 in the rankings, because why not?
So we've got FF2, FF2 Spirit of Rebirth, Soul of Rebirth, and Saga 1 and 2?
Yes, but I'm going to call them Legend 1 and 2 for the sake of this.
Right.
So, you didn't play Final Fantasy 2.
I did not.
You've heard me talk about it, so you feel free to rank it if you want. Let's do your rankings first. How do you feel?
I think I'm gonna
I mean, obviously, like, only one of them you've actually completed.
Right.
But you have enough information to, like, say, how would you rate the quality based upon what you know?
So Soul of Rebirth felt really just ham-fisted with everything that it was doing. So I'm going to rank that one at the bottom, and just the blockiness of Legends 1 was just so egregious. I'm going to put that second from the bottom, and then we'll probably assume Final Fantasy 2 being the most developed is, and I've listened to its soundtrack, right? So
yeah,
it's got a better soundtrack. So we'll go bottom to top. We're going to go Soul of Rebirth, Legends 1, Legends 2, Final Fantasy 2.
All right. So bottom to the top for me. As you know, I value, with JRPGs, a story is like 90% of my ranking.
Right.
Because, I mean, look, honestly, the gameplay for most of these games aren't very good.
Right, really, the gameplay is just like the thing that gets in the way of you getting to the story.
Right. Basically, JRPGs, I just wish they were just like books that came with a CD. And maybe like, like some pictures, at the start of each chapter.
So really, you just want like visual novels.
Yeah.
Congratulations, that's a genre of game that exists now.
I know. I enjoyed Radical Dreamers quite a bit.
How have you finished Hateful Boyfriend yet?
I don't know what that is.
That's the one where you're dating pigeons.
All right, so moving on past that to my ranking, barreling through. I'm gonna actually put Legend 2 at the bottom because even though the graphics are better, it is like the presentation is way, way, way better than Legend 1. Like Legend 1 kind of looks like crap.
It does.
The story just isn't as good as Legend 1. And then I'm going to put Legend 1 right above Legend 2. And then Soul of Rebirth, because I did enjoy Soul of Rebirth quite a bit. And then Final Fantasy 2 at the top.
All right, so unanimous there.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 2. Better than its Game Boy spin-offs and own mini-sequel.
There you go. Well, that is our episode. Steve, where can people find us on the internet?
Lipstickgeneration.com, and then Lipstick Generation on most social media platforms, except for Twitter, where it's Mr. Cool Rock and Roll.
Yes, and if you are in the Nashville area in early August, we're going to be playing the Rockin' Pod Expo. Should be a big show, lots of fun. You want to hang out with us and other music podcasters, and meet Michael Sweet from Striper while you're there too. Should be a fun time, so check that out. And as always, enjoy the grind.
Grind.
Yeah, that's what Kaleb says.
Okay.
Yep. All right, that's our show. Bye, Internet.
Bye.